Ho 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 lo! No, that didn't work as well as I thought it was going to work, but hey ho. Hey ho ho ho. Welcome back to the library is open. Jingle 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 bell sound effect. I hope you've brought your very festive library cards, my darlings, and that you've braved the snow and adverse weather conditions to join me today from the comfort of your own home. We have had snow actually, just as a random fact. We had it the other day, like for about 6 hours, and then it just disappeared again, so there we go. But yes, we have made it to the month of December, or Décembre, depending on where you're from. And I thought, that being as it was, you might like to see my little Christmas tree in the background of the video. So there you go. There she is. I don't know if there are actually any lyrics to that. I think there probably are, but I don't know them. So yeah, here I am, fully Christmased up. I've got my Christmas tree in the background and various decks. I've got my special new Christmas tea mug, which I think is a Yeti. It's from Asda if you're in the UK, possibly Walmart if you're in the US, I don't know. And that's their thing this year, apparently it's a Yeti. Like Aldi's got Kevin the Carrot, they've got a Yeti. So hey ho, it's a free world, allegedly. I've also got my new Wham! Last Christmas t-shirt. Last Christmas, I gave you my library books. The very next day, you returned them overdue. Yeah, this is pretty much what you can expect from any of December's videos. I mean, I think I'm making a concerted effort to be quite festive anyway this year, if I can. I've always liked Christmas and the festive season. That also goes for and to cover Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, the winter solstice, obviously, whatever you choose to celebrate. Or just if you celebrate nothing in particular, but just want to enjoy the season. Yeah, it doesn't necessarily mean that all the videos will have anything to do with the festive season, or any of the books will, but I think aesthetically it's just nice, isn't it? So, funny thing about the Christmas tree actually. So this is Christmas tree 2.0, because the first Christmas tree actually collapsed under its own weight, which was very attention-seeking in my opinion. So I have actually just got a new one from the range. So this is Christmas tree Mark II, and hopefully it will be better. So what can you expect this month in the library is open? Unbridled jollity, ho ho. Every time I say ho ho, in my head I'm going ho ho ho, just so you're aware. You can expect pretty much standard what we normally do, plus some other sort of wintry themed book content, which hopefully will be nice. If you're not into that, I'm sorry about it. So I will still talk about books that are not related to, as I say, the festive season or anything sort of seasonal in that respect, but I'll just do it in a Christmassy way. That's very much a summing up of this particular episode, which is about Frankenstein, which is, you know, not, well, I suppose it really depends on what your definition of festive is. But can I just say as a sidebar as well, how on earth is it the 12th month of 2020? You know, I feel like this year has gone simultaneously so ridiculously quickly, but also at the same time so mind-crushingly slowly that we may well be in some kind of weird Groundhog Day time warp thing. I haven't figured out the science of that. Which, let's face it, would be peak 2020, wouldn't it, in this increasingly dystopian world that we live in. Just realised that my specs on, I wonder why I was squinting. So, okay, let's talk a little bit about this before I just get completely carried away and discuss, you know, various winter-related things. So this, the book for this week is Frankenstein, which I did talk about in a previous video that I said I was going to read, and I finally did read it, which was lovely. So I kind of came to Frankenstein after doing the adaptation for Jekyll and Hyde, which has now been on. I think in the pinned comment of my last video, I posted a link to where you can watch it if you couldn't watch it live. I will do that again with this video. It was a really successful mounting of the show, so watch this space for if anything further comes from that. But the theatre company are also running a GoFundMe at the moment in order to pay the creative people who donated their time for free. But you know, it's a terrible time for the arts industry at the moment, and I'm aware that people don't have surplus cash, but if in any way, shape or form you are able to donate, whatever you would be able to would be so appreciated. So that's my spiel. But interestingly enough, so when I was adapting Jekyll and Hyde, and when I made the video talking about how that adaptation had gone, you may recall, if you saw it, that I noted a lot about how Jekyll and Hyde was such an iconic pop culture property that sort of has spun out into its own second life that isn't actually indicative of the book, which I certainly noticed most vividly when I was rereading before I started writing, and realised, I was like, oh, it's actually quite boring, isn't it? Not in a horrible way, but you know, it's largely epistolary, so told in letters, and there's a lot about the other characters in the novel describing the protagonist as opposed to the actual protagonist's story in their own voice, as it were. And you know, so this was kind of something else I noticed in Frankenstein, which is, again, it's not a critique, because I'm thinking that a lot of, you know, we have to be really aware when we look back at these classic books, that, you know, as much as we have fashions and styles and so on and so forth, or ways of doing things, rules, if you will, then, you know, previous generations had them as well. You know, there were sort of governing laws about how you wrote about things and so on and so forth. So the that's, I can excuse that absolutely, and it's not quite the same as Jekyll and Hyde in the sense that you know, you sort of finish it going, oh, because you do actually get to hear the voice of, you know, the sort of protagonists in this, but I just thought it was really interesting that a lot of those iconic sort of character properties, and I also include like Dracula by Bram Stoker, have these sort of you know, reputations, and well, we think we're really knowledgeable about what happens in the book, even though when you return to the actual source, it's actually nothing to do with what you've seen in films or TV, whatever, just general pop culture. I just think that's really, really fascinating. So I just want to talk a little bit about this beautiful edition first of all as well. Can I just say, this is from the Penguin Horror Collection, which is curated by Guillermo del Toro, the director. And not only do you get the novel in here, which I believe is the revised text that Mary Shelley went back to before it sort of started to really gain popularity, so you get a lot of stuff as well from scholars and other people who, you know, are knowledgeable about the book, talking about both the content, the structure, but also about the sort of wider context. And also there's a really good section where right at the back, where they go through in the appendix all the different adaptations that there've been of the Frankenstein story, and how closely they've stuck to the kind of novel's premise, you know, what they've added. You know, even daft things like, you know, the bolts in Frankenstein's neck that we're so familiar with in iconography doesn't exist in the book, so on and so forth. So, yeah, I mean, if you're not aware, I'll just give you a quick précis. I can't believe it took me this long to read Frankenstein, actually. This is my first time I've ever read it, which, you know, I was sort of telling people, I'm reading Frankenstein, and they're like, oh, how long has it been since you last read it? And I'm like, well, I haven't read it. So, you know, I think that's another interesting thing as well, isn't it, where there's certain books that we think we're supposed to have read, which, as you know, I don't believe in. I just think, just read what you want when you want it. Anyway, so it starts quite like this. This is what started me. So it sort of starts at sea through a series of letters from, let me just get his name correct here, Walton, who is on a sort of voyage. I won't give too much away, I'll just précis it. A voyage and writing home to his sister, and he ends up writing about how he meets a man who is pursuing another man on the ice, and he takes this man aboard, and the man tells him the story of how he came to be in the position that he's in. Turns out the man is called Victor Frankenstein, and he has made, or rather reanimated, a corpse, or a sort of non-human, a non-living body, I should say, and then disgusted at what he'd done, he spurned the creature, and the creature had to sort of survive on its own. And then there was an instant where the creature asks the Doctor to make him a mate because he's very lonely. The Doctor refuses, so the creature starts to try and force his hand by becoming increasingly murderous. Or murderous sounds really judgmental, though, doesn't it? By yeah, well, I mean, it's true though. Becoming murderous, threatening his family and loved ones, and so on and so forth. And so the Doctor is now pursuing the creature in order to end its life. That's the vague précis. So it's about the creation of life, which actually the novel skids over quite a lot. Mary Shelley doesn't actually tell you how the science, or the sort of philosophy behind how this actually happens. But then again, I don't necessarily think that's the point, is it? I don't really think that we're engaging with this text or text like this because we want a sort of user's guide as to how we might do that ourselves. We just want to cut to the chase. So actually, it's quite modern of it, really. A lot of it takes place off stage, as it were, which I suspect is because that Mary Shelley didn't maybe know the science of it. I mean, does anyone? I don't think it's a thing, is it? So still, listen to me like I don't know. Can you reanimate corpses? No, you cannot. As far as we're aware, although, let's face it, that would be another 2020 thing, wouldn't it? Imagine. Doctors have discovered a way to reanimate corpses. Great. Just what we needed this year. But that's fine. So, yeah, a lot of this is told in the sort of Doctor relating the story to Walton, and then Walton writing to his sister to tell her. And there are a few parallels between their two stories in terms of questing and so on and so forth, and having sort of unachievable goals, or goals that they become so obsessed with that then don't actually manifest the way they expected them to. So it's very much a cautionary tale in some respects. But I think the most interesting parts of the book are sort of when the creature goes rogue. And I say the creature because there is a really interesting section in the intro, actually, where Mary Shelley sort of... Mary Shelley is reported on talking about how she refers to the creature, because a lot of people have sort of said monster and so on and so forth, but monster doesn't feel accurate for what the creature is. There was apparently a production in London, a theatrical production, where the actor who was playing the creature was just listed in the cast list as a line, so the character had no name at all, which is kind of wonderful in a way, because it's sort of, we don't, I think, need to label what this person is, this creation is. There's the creature or blank, which I think probably ties in a lot to how people, how the name got adopted, that the creature is called Frankenstein, which, the creature is not called Frankenstein, the Doctor is called Frankenstein, and the creature doesn't actually have a name. But it would be quite interesting if we called him Adam or something like that, sort of like a biblical link or something to the first new man or something. I mean, because the subtitle is, or the surtitle I should say, to the book is The Modern Prometheus, so there is something about that sort of new world kind of idea about the book, and whether, new worlds or innovations are always necessarily positive things. Can we move forward constantly in innovation, technology, whatever? Can we always do that in a positive way? I don't think we can. Is technology always a great thing? No, objectively. Because does it in fact create more problems than it solves? These are some of the kind of questions that the text either wrestles with overtly or leads us in a modern context to think about, which I think is lovely. There's my favourite section is the section that focuses on the creature's thoughts, when he sort of goes to he's been cast out by Frankenstein, and he goes to stay in this shack, and he has to sort of learn about the world, which he does by observing this family. And there's a beautiful set piece where he sort of becomes very close to this family, like mentally, but they've never met him. And you know, he sort of learns about life and understanding language and so on and so forth. It's very sort of like a sort of absentee parent and child kind of situation, because he didn't learn that from his father, or animator or whatever. And then unfortunately, when he decides to take the step to introduce himself to the family, you know, they're terrified of him, which only leads to his sense of loneliness and isolation. And I think there is something in there, isn't there, that's quite interesting, that links to the idea of faith and religion, Christianity specifically, but I'm sure quite true of all other religions in one shape or form, because they tend to mirror one another, give or take, about, you know, the expulsion from the Garden of Eden, and the fact that if we are to believe in a creator, is it in fact a moral responsibility for that creator to look after its creations? You know, sort of in the Bible, you know, when you look at Adam and Eve thrown out of paradise for seeking the gift of knowledge, you know, I've never really been, I'll say up front, I'm not a religious person myself, but, you know, you do you, as long as you don't harm other people in the pursuit of it. I've always been really uncomfortable with the idea that, you know, someone, call them what you will, a deity, a god, whatever, makes toys to play with, and then when they don't follow the rules, just gets rid of them. And that is something very much that comes across in Frankenstein. The creature sort of confronts Frankenstein with this, and I think that's such a fascinating philosophical question. It's like, if you beget something, aren't you responsible for it? We could probably argue either way, but yeah, and I suppose in some respects as well, what happens when the things that you create gain more power in one form or another? Like, the creature objectively is more powerful than his creator. The quote on the back, which is a brilliant bit in the novel, is you are my creator, but I am your master, obey. And actually, you know, there is something about the power dynamic there, in terms of, while sorry if I don't mean this to be heretical, but, you know, I speak as I find. If there is a supreme creator who made us as, you know, his subjects, objects, playthings, whatever you want to call it, there is a reciprocal relationship there, in terms of, if we as the creations no longer acknowledge you, don't you essentially become obsolete? Like, the creator needs its creations as much as the creations need to be guided by the creator. Sort of working that out in my head as I go along, but I think it's really, really interesting. There isn't any point in having supreme power if people don't recognise it, I guess, is my point. Or having abilities, as with the Doctor here, if you aren't going to use them in a way that corresponds with morality or obligation. It's very confusing novel in many ways, and I just thought it was a monster thing. But, you know, it's very sort of a book of its time, in terms that it's wrestling with this weird, as Jekyll and Hyde did, with this weird kind of intersection of faith and science, and nobody was really sure at the time which one was going to win. I still don't think we're sure. And as they've sort of bled into one another, you know, what if science is the new religion? What if innovation is the new god? Whatever, you know. not necessarily my opinions, just expressing what the context is. So, so yeah, it's fascinating. I mean, I love the story behind it as well, because I think it was summer of 1846, I believe, that this was written. If you're not aware, Mary Shelley and her husband and some friends were holidaying, and they set each other a challenge, basically, to write a story. I think it was a scary story, a ghost story, I forget. And this is what Mary Shelley came up with in response to that brief. And I'm trying to find the information now in the book, so I keep looking down. I think it was the summer of 1846, no, it wasn't. It was the summer of 1816, which I believe is referred to as the year without a summer, due to sort of climate upheaval and so on and so forth. I don't think there was a proper delineated summertime that season, which sort of adds to this weird sort of gothic-y kind of vibe around the creation of the story, and also that sort of pervades the storytelling. Even now when we read it, you know, there's very much an evocation of that without actually being explicit about it in the text. So it's fascinating. So yeah, I sort of don't want to say too much more about the actual text, because, you know, it's very readable. I read it very fast. Not that those two are the same things, and it's a weird thing, isn't it? Because it's like, again, with Bram Stoker's Dracula and Stevenson's Jekyll and Hyde and other things of the period, because we already think we know the story so well, there isn't much in the way of shocks unless they're related to you know, the little individual plot points, or the discrepancies in what we were expecting. So, you know, it's no spoiler, I guess I should say, that this is essentially a gothic tragedy, although it does also have the hallmarks of a gothic romance, only the romance is kind of the object of the intended romance, shall we say, doesn't exist, I guess. So yeah, would I recommend this? Absolutely. Absolutely. I think it actually could make a really good Christmas season book in terms of, or maybe not Christmas, maybe New Year. You know, that sort of very reflective time, and where you're sort of sitting around thinking about life, love, and the universe. This could be lovely to sort of sit by the fire, nice glass of something, tea, coffee, pot noodle, a spiced rum, depending on your taste. I would have a tea, obviously. You know, and just sort of think about, you know, what is humanity? Who made us? Who maintains us? Is anybody out there in the universe? What are our responsibilities to our fellow creatures? What are our responsibilities to the creatures that we either, you know, beget or adopt or whatever, you know? So I think that could be really, really an interesting thought experiment, shall we say, for the festive season, if you're not just wanting to read about Santa Claus. Not that there's anything wrong with reading about Santa Claus, and I will get to that, I promise. So, yeah, sorry, this has been quite musy, hasn't it? Possibly more musy than my other vlogs, but then again, I don't think that these vlogs are really, you know, Cliff Note versions of the books. I'm not being a teacher here, you know. We're just chatting, aren't we? And I'm just raising things that I think are interesting. But I would recommend this, and I think if you are going to get a copy, I think this is a great copy to get. Not only do you get the beautiful sprayed edges, but you also get a lot of contextual stuff that really makes you think, both about the novel itself and its contents, but also about the creation of icons and how stories take on a life of their own once they're in the public domain, and become not necessarily what they are, but what people want them to be. A bit like Frankenstein and the monster. So there we go. That is this week's book. So let me know what you think. Anybody a huge fan of Frankenstein? Anybody read Frankenstein, seen Frankenstein, anything like that? You know, I always love to hear from you. If you just want to pop in and say hello, then that's absolutely cool as well. Keep your eyes peeled, because there will be another video very shortly called... I don't know what it's called yet, but it will be about my sort of wintry reading recommendations. You know, just a couple of books that if you're wanting to get in that sort of festive or just seasonal spirit, what would be good to read with a glass of alcoholic or non-alcoholic mulled wine before a roaring fire, or a 3-bar heater in my case, with a wonky Christmas tree. So anyway, that's it for now. The library is officially closed, so put your cards somewhere safe. Like, subscribe if you haven't already, or don't do neither. It's just nice to have you here. I hope you're all staying safe and staying warm as much as you can. It's bloody freezing, isn't it? In the words of Kerris from Catatonia. Take care of yourselves and everyone around you, and I will see you in the next episode. Much love. Mwah.